So, you co-preside the Club of Rome. So for our audience, a little bit more information about what the Club of Rome is.
Hello?
So it's a network of
Good.
thought
Can you hear me?
leaders. I think you have about 100 members nowadays. The Club of Rome is dedicated to defining comprehensive solutions to the complex, interconnected challenges of the world. That's quite the mission, isn't it?
Yeah, that's quite a mouthful.
The Club of Rome has been around for a long time.
They have too long, and not enough has happened since.
So yeah, just over 50 years ago, the Club of Rome published a report called The Limits to Growth in 1972. It was a bestseller, millions of copies sold, and it was already warning that the human footprint cannot grow forever on a finite planet. You wish we had listened a bit more. Anyway, so last year, for the 50th anniversary, a group of scientists and economics, including you, published a book called Earth for All.
Yeah, here it is, Earth for All. And by the way, it's at the bookstore if any of you want a signed copy.
So it's Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity.
Yeah.
So the key is in the title. So the book uses computer modeling to explore policies likely to deliver the most good for the majority of people. So this well-being economy we've been talking about very much. So it's interesting because it's not describing a world that's completely utopian. It's actually plausible and feasible. So can you walk us how?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to commend the last panel because I think they were great. And of course, Timothée, who's a real rock star. So bravo to Timothée. I think there's several aspects that were brought up that I want to weave into some of the thinking that we've been doing through Earth for All. One is a little bit what was said around it being scary to rethink, actually, the way in which we develop differently and we address growth. And I would say the reverse. I actually think it's incredibly hopeful. Right. I think part of what I said yesterday is we don't realize just how broken our systems are. We are now suffering from the 3 C's, so climate, COVID, and conflict, and the 4th C, which I want to reinforce, which was Timothée's message, capitalism. Capitalism is not delivering. So beyond the fact that we've grown way beyond the finite boundaries of the Earth, that we've done exactly what the limits to growth indicated we would do, which is start to have these tipping points in the 2020s, we are also suffering, all of us personally, from a quality of life which is not what it was for our parents. And I can say that in terms of my generation, but I can definitely say it in terms of the next generation. So what does that mean? Because I want to bring in an element of, let's shift from the fear, because by the way, the fear is going to be either what is going to mobilize us or what is going to keep us so scared that we'll go into the ostrich syndrome, which is what most people do, including policymakers. So we cannot enable that fear to encroach in terms of the way in which we address solutions. We can only use it as a reality check to wake up in the morning and say, holy shit, I got to get something done. And that is really important. I think the other element I want to bring in is tapping into our subconsciousness of what we've just lived through. The COVID pandemic was a huge wake-up call. It was a wake-up call that actually going back to what was most essential, being with our loved ones, ensuring that we had access to a care economy, which, by the way, is not included in the real economy and should absolutely be. So all of a sudden, we can tap into our own subconsciousness of transformation because we all transformed. I mean, we're all happy we're not wearing masks, but just think about a year ago, we were. Every single time we came together, we were wearing a mask. We all got vaccines. A lot of people in France didn't, but the fact of the matter is that most of us did get vaccinated. Too many times? Who would have thought? To be told that we cannot transform is utter bullshit. I mean, I want to repeat this. It is bullshit. If we are going to change now, we have to realize that we already have changed. Embody that change. Understand that the system dynamic models that we talk about are not some kind of theory. They're actually a beautiful way to get us out of the mess that we've created. So it's scary, but it's incredibly hopeful. And I think that's a really important message to give. And then I'll give to some of the solutions.
Yeah. So what does that mean? We've talked about business and finance quite a lot. The business of the 20th century, what does that look like then?
Well, the business, and merci Philippe, and Philippe and I have been working together for many, many years, and he's been a real champion in trying to shift the financial system. And Melanie, I fully agree with what you said. I think that the business community, the business model is absolutely the ethos of the problem. It's based on the financial model of the fact that we're moving continuously into a profit motive, shareholder value, short-term value, and that every time we have an incredible business leader like Paul Polman or Emmanuel Faber from Danone, we know that they're getting pushed to the side because actually they are champions of a change. We have to ensure that there is a juxtaposition between the new indicators which we put in place in the economy that place the value that we need so that they give the economic signals to the financial system. The financial system is now what is determining everything that we do, and it shouldn't. We are not taking into consideration the real mechanisms of the economy. We are not taking into consideration the real actors in the economy, as I said, the care economy. But if we start to look at the way, for example, a well-being economy has the three pillars of indicators: environmental indicators, social indicators, and of course, economic indicators. And I agree with Melanie, and let's put in the governance indicators, because my God, the hypocrisy and the lack of integrity that we have across the board, across all our governance models, must be taken into account. If you look at all of that, you place a value in it within your economic system, then all of a sudden your economic system is determining where your capital flows. But for the moment, it is the financial system that is determining our economy. And as I said yesterday, not taking into account the fact that we have SMEs that are the drivers, at least of the European economy, by 98%. All of our decisions are being put into multinational frameworks rather than thinking through that it is people on the ground in small and medium-sized enterprises that are really making sure that we get food on the table, that we actually have access to water, to all the essentials that we need. So I think it's really important to rethink, one, what then is the new consciousness? What are our own consciousness and value systems that we want to bring this to? Secondly, let's ensure that we have the models to bring that forward. Last week was an amazing week. For those of you who were participating or who weren't, and some of us were there at the European Parliament, multi-party Green Growth Conference, absolutely phenomenal. Opened up by the President of the European Commission and also the President of the Parliament. And it's not Green Growth, sorry, I should not have said that. Beyond Growth. Thank you, Lena. It's reminding me, no, Sandrine, that was not about green growth. But to come to that point, and then I'll let you give me your next question. I want to read something that I had in my speech, and I was honored enough to follow President von der Leyen, who actually opened up with talking about limits to growth in the Club of Rome. So it was truly an honor. And she did this knowing full well that her own party was blocking the conference. And I also think that was an important signal. My key message is, and again, this is a little bit what I said yesterday, let us be much more strategic. I agree with Timothée that there are different shades of growth, but we really have to be careful. Because as I said yesterday, the other side is just waiting. Capitalism is strong, incumbents are strong, and all they're going to do is just make sure that we bicker with each other as to what is the color of our growth model. And I want to be very clear that yes, there is room for all of it as long as we shift towards new indicators and a well-being model. And also that the key message to politicians who are campaigning on economic growth, and we're going to see through the European elections next year, most of our elections that are coming up in the United States, in other parts of the world, it will be a growth platform. So what I said to the auditorium was people don't want economic growth. They want economic security. They want ecological stability. They want government investment in their future. And economic and financial systems that foster their well-being. That is what we want today. That is where we are in our consciousness. Let's make sure that every single policymaker is conscious of this fact and call them out. we call bullshit on your model of continuous economic growth because it actually is not working. People are getting poorer, people are getting miserable, people are getting sicker, and our planet is dying.
Right, what's the message? I think I'm very much aware that for this particular session, all the speakers are from the global north. And I think when we talk about degrowth and other models, they might not be the best to apply to different circumstances. So, for example, if we look at the global south, what's the way to this well-being economy in the global south, for example?
So in Earth for All and all the work that the Club of Rome does and its members, none of us are saying that the South needs to degrow. That would be absolutely ridiculous. First of all, if the South has not moved into a proper economic development model, and what do we call that in the first place, or if they have not reaped the benefits from economic development, it's because of neocolonialism, it's because of the way in which we have taken resources from the South and not ensured that the global commons are actually giving more prosperity to Southern nations. So we need to also, and that is the other elephant in the room, I mean, colonialism is a huge issue. We saw from the donut economy presentation from Kate that the footprint in the South is much less than our own footprint. And let's remember that our footprint is also bringing in all the resources from the South. So how do we have that dialogue? The dialogue is one of, and by the way, many of these countries don't want to grow in the same way. Many of these countries understand the value of nature. Many of these countries have incredible indigenous people who are on the front lines to protect their forests, to protect their natural resources, and who are saying, this is our right, this is our land, this is our survival. So what we need to do is make sure that all of us, when we speak about a new growth model, we accept the responsibility of the North. We ensure that we reduce our consumption patterns. We enhance the way in which we work with the South in terms of our bilateral trade negotiations, in terms of the way in which, if we want to look at technology exchange and knowledge exchange, it is a proper exchange, not just us plundering and then not actually giving anything back. And most importantly, we absolutely have to take into consideration the transactional costs that have come from us reaping the benefits from the South and start to look at debt cancellation, special drawing rights. Many of the messages that we should be giving here in the next month when we have the Macron Summit, and I'm looking towards you, Philippe, when we're all here at the Macron Summit, we have to hold Macron accountable for a summit that fosters capital flows that go in the right direction. Because it's going pear-shaped. It is going pear-shaped right now behind the scenes. I know what the working groups are working on. They're not talking about wealth taxation. They're not talking about all the things that we need to talk about to make sure, and by the way, there aren't enough Southern nations at the table to even have the right conversation. So the South has to be part of the conversation. They also need to be able to be given a voice that is their own, that is a true voice. And let's not pretend that they want to have a capitalistic model like the West because we know best. Once again, I call bullshit on that one too.
Yeah. One last thing, obviously, you've mentioned it. There are a lot of very powerful people who are benefiting from the current system that will fight hard to keep the status quo. You know, you can, you've given ways to call them out, of course, but what can, you know, members of the audience here, what can they do to make sure they change? You know, to
I've got Lena whispering. She knows exactly what I'm going to say next. It's so funny. It's a perfect planted question. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Change Now conference, but there are Change Now activists outside at the Total General Assembly. Right now, while we sit here talking to each other, they're all out there fighting and saying enough is enough, to windfall profits on the back of energy poverty, to the fact that Total and others have continued to invest in fossil energy. We know we have to pull out. That is one way to do it. I have my beautiful girlfriends, Adelaide, Anuna, Louisa. All of them are out there with so many others, incredible young women and men and scientists who are out there protesting right now. We need to continue to have those protests. We need to have the bravery to call out these incumbents, these stranded assets that are holding us back from truly moving towards a new type of model that makes us thrive as human beings and also ensures that we stay within the planetary boundaries. I was an advisor to the oil and gas sector for 10 years, including OPEC. I know their games. The fact that beyond petroleum is now firmly back to petroleum. I mean, let's be very clear. BP has transitioned and changed their name 3 times. They are now not only back to petroleum, they've withdrawn most of their investments in renewables because short-term profits. They know they can make more money right now off all of our backs, while we pay high energy prices. They are just having a good old time continuing to produce fossil energy and extract more. We have to do exactly what those incredible, brave people are doing, but we also needed to do it in the corridors of power. And I promise that I will continue to do what I can in the corridors of power as well.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. I'm sure you won't be alone. And I wish you lots of luck.
Can I just say one? Well,
yeah,
we're
out of time, but I still want to ask you one last thing.
Yeah.
We have all these young people who are protesting, etc. They've been doing that, for a few years now. They've changed the discourse a little bit for a certain generation, I would say. But there is still the main narrative still needs to change if we have if we want to have this massive paradigm shift. So how do you change the narrative for real? So the media, politicians stop praising a plan for growth.
Yeah, this is why the systems approach is so important, and that's why I'm so proud to work for such an incredible organization like the Club of Rome. But also, let's be clear, last year, actually, DG Research and Innovation in the European Commission, and that's why I'm also proud to chair one of their incredible expert working groups, they changed their directorate name to People, Planet, and Prosperity. They actually changed their entire setup, their organogram, so they have people in charge of people, planet, prosperity with proper feedback loops to actually look at how we invest our Horizon funds in the future and how that actually treats all 3. We need to maximize the game changers in every single institution. I've set up a series of circles of trust. I actually was on the phone with incredible women in the Asian Development Bank this week, talking about how they could change the Asian Development Bank. I am setting up and having conversations with so many unbelievable people who are all realizing it's time for change. But we have to create that comfort for them as well, to come out, to feel comfortable with the right tools. That's what we try to do through Earth for All in our policy recommendations. Not to come in and give some kind of fuzzy, naive interpretation of how we can move forward. To be honest, yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be complex. We can create 50 champions of change within our ecosystems from a business perspective. Here's how you can do it. Here are the incubators that are already doing it. And it's not just changing or bringing forward new entrepreneurs. It's working within organizations to talk about circularity, regenerative, which, by the way, saves money. We can talk about all of those things, but at the end of the day, I think it's fundamental that we remember that we also have to support each other as individuals. We have to support each other every single day because this is hard work. And I'm saying it from someone who's had a burnout, who herself has suffered from constantly fluctuating between despair and hope. But I do believe, and this is where I will finish, that there are several ways to remind ourselves to do that, and I'm going to play a little game. One way is to remember, and I think I said this yesterday, that there are 3 Ps we have to shift from every single morning when we wake up, and that's profit, power, and patriarchy. And there are 3 Ps that we need to move to, and that's people, planet, and prosperity. And to do that, we need to then introduce in our lives what I call the beautiful L's. There are limits, but we have to learn to live within limits. There are ways to learn, and we have to remember to learn from each other. And listen more than speak so that we can actually introduce valuable, game-changing solutions for all of us with great diversity. We have to laugh. and remember when we actually need to lead so that we can be the legacy of a new type of model that fosters people and prosperity.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. What a way of finishing.
Thank you.
What a way of finishing. I think we're waiting up. Here it is. That's the final drawing from Fanny.